Alright, welcome back. This is the first video on this truck. We're going to call this truck number 3. And if you haven't seen the other video, this is a 1987 359 long hood stand-up that we picked up recently and are doing a pretty major get it ready for the road once over. Replacing a lot of air lines, the fuel lines, getting the tanks rebarreled, rebuilding the transmission, replacing the clutch, getting the fifth wheel machined so we can put a 2050 clutch in, and doing a lot of work on the back end here. Now, I think I'm going to talk about this first just because it's an important thing to talk about working on these old trucks. We bought it from someone that we just figured knew what they were doing, had mechanics, they had painted the frame and put new brakes on the truck, and everything looked great. Now this is all stud pilot back here, all 4 corners are stud pilot, and what happened was a couple things. First one is when they put the new drums on, they did not get the right drums, and the problem with that is if you put hub pilot drums on stud pilot hubs, the drum actually will not seat all the way against the hub. It'll sit out a bit. And then when you put the tower nuts on, and I'll show you here what I'm talking about. This is one of the studs that we popped out of this truck. And this much of it goes through the hub. And then you have the brake drum, then your rim, and then you take a tower nut like so, and you put it on. That tower nut holds your inner rim, your outer rim goes on here, and then your actual nut goes on like this. And this whole system holds your duals on. What happened was, these studs are too short, and when you put the wrong hub on, that sits farther out this stud because it can't actually go against the hub. Once you put a rim on that, you put this on, it can only grab a wee bit of thread. And here, which this is the driver's side, about half of the studs all got stripped because these nuts didn't go on far enough, and I would assume once it got to this point of them not knowing what they were doing, they probably didn't know that you don't torque this stuff down to 500 pounds like some people would torque down hub pilot stuff, or just throw the impact on, crank it on, and call it good. So what happened was we drove home with about half of the studs stripped on the back end here. And everything looked good when we checked it over before we left, because all we saw was the nut and the stud here, like you see here. These are left-hand thread because they're from the driver's side. And everything on here seemed right because it was. This, which only holds the outside rim on, was fine. And when you checked them, you couldn't check how the inner rim situation was. You can't see the inner stud, so everything looked fine. And it wasn't. So when we got back here, tearing this apart, we found out that 3 of those 4 brand new drums were already cracked. Fortunately, nothing bad happened. Everything went fine. We didn't lose any tires. No catastrophic failures of any kind. But it was a good example of be careful who you let work on your old stuff. It's not all self-explanatory. There are incompatibilities with parts that not everyone's going to know about. We got in contact with the people we bought the truck from and told them what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and so that's good. It won't hurt to have all new studs on the truck anyway, especially because there is a little bit of inconsistency in the threading. and the new hardware doesn't always match with the old hardware. It's just very slightly different in the threading, so it's better just to update everything to all new hardware at one time. Other than that, this diff had water in it because the truck has sat for a very long time, and we think it's okay. We're gonna run a camera in there, check it over, clean it up. We're gonna put axles with 4-way locks on this thing eventually, just not right away. So chances are this one's okay, just new bearings and seals and everything, clean it up. And this one had very minor pitting in the bearings, but of course we're just gonna replace everything. I've been going around ripping off airlines like this that we're gonna throw out, cleaning up a lot of the wiring, kind of stripping it back down to factory harnesses, and then if we want to add anything, we'll use all new wiring, all new hoses, all new fuel lines, all of the little things that can leave you on the side of the road. Hopefully we'll get those covered and not have any issues. The fuel tanks were getting rebarreled, should be done soon. There was an old style fuel water separator / fuel heater here, and we threw it out. It wasn't even hooked up anyway. These air cleaner mounts are a FAR air cleaner. The number here is D7867002H. If you're not familiar with this system, it's not a great one. Your filter sits here on this ledge. So you take the filter, put the stainless wrap on, put that rubber ring on the intake to hold the stainless semi in place, put it up here, put the boot on, and then there are clamps on both sides to tighten everything up. It's not as nice as the Vortox, but as long as we can find the filters for it, I haven't found the filters yet, it shouldn't be a big problem. The engine, we're just drawing samples. It runs fine. Probably rebuild it at some point, but it doesn't need it right now, so we're not going to bother. I don't think there's such a thing as a white 4 1/4, but correct me if I'm wrong. I like this. I'm going to leave it that way. It looks cool. It goes with the paint, so I'm fine with it. I took the headlights off. We're going to put double squares back on it. It has long pedestals for the double squares, so that should work out nice. This is how the air cleaner looks all assembled. This is the stainless wrap, and this ring holds the stainless. It doesn't actually seal anything. This is just for looks. And then here's the bars that hold everything together. And being a long hood with a mechanical motor, it sure is easy to get at your brake valve and everything else down there. It's like a dream. Here's the old air dryer that I took off. It's getting thrown out. Pulled the door apart. We're going to insulate it, go through everything, clean it up. One thing that's interesting is he did have either electric locks or an alarm system or both. But in here there's a little electric motor. It fastens on the little arm here. I'll just show you how clean the bunk is corrosion-wise. It's just very minor stuff on this edge, but it doesn't seem to corrode nearly as bad as the newer trucks do. And I think it has something to do with them keeping the skin up this 1/4 inch instead of right flush with the bottom. I think that actually saves these panels, because the 359s don't have as much trouble as the newer stuff as far as I can see. And even on the door where they usually start to corrode, there's nothing. A couple of bolts broke off. That's a minor issue. We're reinforcing the sills, running a bar from edge to edge, drilling out the door, and then having the mirror thread into that heavy bar, so then it holds everything tight together and doesn't crack the sill. And there's nothing else to see on this side. Everything's torn apart. Just as a quick rule of thumb for taking all of this stuff off, you're going to need 1 inch, a 3/4, a 7/8. 3/4 and 7/8 will do all your brake stuff. 1 inch will do the main lines, and then all your other lines around the motor tend to be 9/16. But anyway, that's what we're doing. I'll spare you some of the boring detail of just going through and taking lines off. And I'll catch up with you when I have something more interesting. Thanks for watching.